We are finishing this series today. Let's look at Galatians 5. This has been our theme chapter for this series. And Paul writes here about the fruit of the Spirit, and he says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And when you read through that list, we find a list of words, and they're kind of hard to argue with. Of course, we need more love, and we need more peace. And a lot of us need a lot more patience, and we need more kindness. These are things we need, but they're also things we want. We want to be about this kind of stuff. We like that wish. We wish others did that list, and we wish that we did that list more often. Until we come to the last word, self-control. And in our English Bibles, it's the only word that's contracted out of the bunch. Like it took two words in English to be able to say what they're actually trying to communicate. And this one, I think it's like a giant billboard. Like it's not about the ideal of love. This is about my self-control. This is about myself. Like how am I gonna control myself? Or how is God gonna work in me so that I have control over myself? And to be honest, most of us view self-control like an overdue dentist appointment. It's necessary, but we kind of dread it. For every other virtue listed in Galatians 5, the culture has its own counterfeit form of this. And very often, the cultural counterfeit is carefully chosen so that the true version, the one that's based on God, the one that is based on the Bible, it can start to look like a vice. And this can lead people to believe that Christians are the problem. When we talk about sin, they say we're just being hypocritical. But our culture doesn't love self-control. I think actually our culture hates it. And every counterfeit virtue hangs on this difference. Godly love is self-controlled. The culture's love is about self-fulfillment. Godly peace is about submission. The culture's peace is about freedom from any restriction. Godly faithfulness is a permanent covenant that comes first from God. The culture's faithfulness is motivated by, well, what do I desire right now? I said at the beginning that love is the foundation of all of these. If love is the foundation of the fruit of the Spirit, then self-control is the power behind it. Self-control is like the bookend that makes them all possible. Love requires self-control so that you respond to somebody the way that they need you to, not just the way you feel. Joy requires self-control so that you are actually filling your life with good things rather than imbibing to numb the pain. And self-control requires you to ask the question, what is most important right now? Self-control is being intentional before you respond. Now more than ever, one moment can destroy, in one day, one moment can destroy your life. It can ruin your marriage, it can ruin your parenting, it can ruin your job. One moment, one decision can ruin it all. You can have all the talent in the world. You can draw a ton of attention for it. But if your abilities are not matched by strong character, you can ruin it all in an instant. Proverbs 25 says, like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. Self-control realizes there is a devil that tempts you, and that the more important you are, the more he wants to get you. You need self-control to resist doing things that you shouldn't, and you need self-control to do the things that you know you should. Self-controlled people, very simply, they have their priorities straight. When they're tempted by the bottle, they first consider how they're gonna get home and how they're gonna feel in the morning, and is it worth it? When they're insulted to their face, self-controlled people question whether they should return fire. Because when you return fire, is it a helpful response at all? Self-control says, my marriage is more important than a feeling I'm feeling right now or a desire I have right now. It also says, before I even get married, I want to become the kind of faithful person that someone else can trust and therefore fall in love with. It places their family over an impulsive sexual desire. Researchers discovered something fascinating about willpower. It's limited. It's finite. In experiment after experiment, people who performed difficult tasks were more likely to succumb to temptation right afterwards. Researchers have concluded that like a battery, our willpower gets depleted with use. Therefore, self-control also requires boundaries so that you don't have to rely on sheer willpower to resist temptation. Like perhaps shut off the computer when you're lonely. Perhaps hire a trainer if you need help with accountability. Self-control saves money before it spends money. And if you open that email and it just steams you to the core, maybe you take a moment before you answer. You find a coworker who you trust. Let them proofread it first so that you actually give a response you're gonna be proud of later. Self-control doesn't require you to be a perfect person. None of you are. I'm not either. But it does require you to be an intentional person. Self-control requires boundaries and it requires better habits. We like to think that all our decisions are the product of conscious thought, but that is such an illusion. In many situations, especially stressful situations, we default to the automatic routines that we built our lives on. It's why we often fall into unhealthy or sinful habits, even after we've resolved to change. John Ortberg says, habits eat willpower for breakfast. In Proverbs 5, it says that an evil man is held captive by his own sins. They are ropes that catch and hold him. He will die for lack of self-control. He will be lost because of his great foolishness. This proverb is talking about something that the Apostle Paul calls spiritual slavery. You're being held down. You're bound because you don't have the self-control to say no. You're trapped. You're becoming the very thing you never wanted to become. An addict, a cheater, a liar, a thief, whatever it is. Whatever you dreamed your life would become. Self-control helps you say no to the things that get in the way. Now, we picked this series on purpose because we knew we were headed into a hot political time. And I wore my most political shirt today. It's a UT Longhorn, and we're debating who should be #1 in the polls and all that. So this is my most political shirt I have. You're welcome. It's a hot political time. Don't you feel it? I feel it. I feel it everywhere. And part of the magic of the fruit of the Spirit is that they beg you to respond to others in abnormal ways. Abnormal ways. It is not natural for people to be loving and joyful and patient and gentle with people who disagree with them. That is not natural at all. But it's what God asks us to do. How we treat people is part of how we give testimony. Not just what we think about faith, but how has faith changed me? How has faith changed you? To say it another way, does it pass the smell test, that faith of yours? And we as a church, I want you to know we respect your right to vote, and we respect your right to vote your conscience. We tell you about Christian values, but we don't endorse candidates. We don't tell you how to think. We don't tell you how to vote. Like this morning, I will not tell you about Missouri Amendment 2 that allows sports betting. People are debating whether it's gonna fund schools or not. I don't have a clue about it. I don't know how it works. And the truth is, honestly, I don't have a lot to say about placing a wager. But I do have an opinion about whether Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm not gonna tell you. I will tell you that everybody I know that places a lot of online sports wagers has to borrow money from their family. Everybody I know. But if you want to put $5 next year on the Astros to win the World Series, probably a good bet. But this is my way of saying I think placing a lot of wagers is pretty dumb. And if you're gonna bet $10 on a game and you make $20 a year, that's pretty dumb. Besides, the house always wins and casinos keep getting bigger. But again, I don't have a lot to say about Missouri Amendment number 2. Amendment 3 to the Missouri Constitution is different. Messiah is a congregation of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. We're a biblical church, and as a biblical church, we believe that life begins in the womb. And we've talked about this many times in recent years. We've talked about John the Baptist leaping in the womb when his mother encounters the Virgin Mary. It's like he knew his Savior was there. It's like there was faith even in the womb for John. Biblical passages that say that God has knit you in the womb in his image. Now, the political opinions on this, they're pretty clever. The positions are usually called pro-choice and pro-life. They would never call themselves like pro-death or pro-no choices ever. I mean, they're clever. But our district president sent me a slide that he wanted me to share with you. And this is what it says. It says that this amendment would make abortion a constitutional right in Missouri for all 9 months of pregnancy at a provider's determination. It talks about viability, but then it offers other determination. And as a constitutional amendment, it would eliminate all current laws regarding abortion, including a partial birth abortion ban, parental consent for minors, some of the laws that are for health and safety standards for abortion clinics, and requirements for abortion clinics to show a baby's ultrasound to the mother before they make a decision. Now, I taught ethics at a university for 9 years, amongst other classes, but the ethics classes were always the most interesting. And I would guess that when I started a class, that 70 or 75%, maybe even more, of my students were pro-choice. I taught at night. There was a lot of nursing students. A lot of these people were already adults. They had made up their mind, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the ethical dilemmas that helped students grapple a little bit more wholly with this issue was discussing homicide. In most states, when someone murders a pregnant woman, they are charged with a double homicide. And I would ask the class their opinion. Is it a double homicide? And overwhelmingly, they would answer yes. Why? They would say because 2 lives have been taken. And I have done several funerals for lost pregnancies. I have done funerals for stillborn babies as a pastor. Why? Because those parents told me they lost their child. A child that they had conceived, a child that they had already loved for months. They had prayed for them. They had talked to them in the womb. They would sing to them in the womb. And now they needed to give them to God. And they would tell me that it gives them comfort to know that God loves their child. Now, it is not enough to have an opinion and to try to force it on people. And as the church, we are to be a place of comfort and grace for all people. And no matter your past, no matter your opinion, we care about you. We are here to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to you, to everyone. And notably that he has died for the sins of the world, all the sins of the world, and that we all need forgiveness in countless ways, me first. We need it. And also, I promise you as as one of your pastors, that we want to help mothers make decisions that protect them and in ways that give them hope and help. Did you know that close to 85% of Down syndrome pregnancies are ended with after prenatal testing? The numbers range from 60 to 90%, but the best evidence says close to 85%. At Messiah, we put on Night to Shine to say to families of those with special needs, your son or daughter is our special guest. Their life matters to us. And you, Messiah, give every year tens of thousands of dollars to make that true. And hundreds of you show up to serve them and to honor them. And you do that every year. Thank you. Messiah has supported Lutheran Family and Children's Services, which helps mothers support their child or to find a suitable home for a child that needs one. And we've done it with other organizations as well. Messiah gave thousands of dollars one year to Our Lady's Inn, and I got to present the check to them, and they just cried with thanksgiving when they opened the door and I gave them the check. Overwhelmed by your generosity, that you cared. And they provide housing and support for pregnant women so that choosing to have a baby wouldn't destroy their lives. We've given thousands of dollars to Sparrow's Nest, another nonprofit that helps families who are disadvantaged. It is not enough to have an opinion and try to force it on people. We have to help, and the church needs to be the first ones to do it. So thank you, Messiah, for making a difference for mothers and children in our community. You overwhelm me with pride as a pastor. You know, in the early church, the defining mark of the early Christian church, I'm talking first century, like late first century, early second century, the defining mark is the way that they responded and how the Roman community viewed them. And there's even a quote by one of the emperors who said, "What is it with these Jews?" He was referring to Christians, us, Jewish believers of Jesus. "What's up with these Jews? They take care of their young and ours," which is to say that when Romans would infanticide, they would take babies, and when the baby was born with a deformity or a baby wasn't needed or the baby was the wrong gender, they would leave the baby in the woods so that the fates could determine it because the family didn't want it. And the Christians would roam in the forest and they would rescue these babies and raise them as their own. That was our defining mark. And the Roman emperor himself noticed this difference. So when we say we're about life, we're not just about political opinions. We're about life, meaning let's rescue life. I want to finish today with the story from the Hebrew Bible. Let me set it up. King Saul is the king of Israel, but he's doing a terrible job. And in fact, David had to slay the giant that Saul was supposed to slay, because Saul was their greatest warrior. Saul had never been defeated, but Saul was too cowardly. So David slays the giant, and now David becomes famous. And he's anointed king while Saul is still on the job. But he doesn't try to take the throne. He doesn't want to steal the throne. He actually marries into Saul's family. He marries Saul's daughter. And verbally, he's always supporting Saul. And actually, he's always supporting Saul as his king, even though David is the newly anointed king. But Saul doesn't care about David's loyalty. He cares only about his own royalty. And so he's jealous of him. And he tries to take out his own son-in-law, tries to kill him. And you thought your family had drama. And in 1 Samuel 24, this is what the prophet writes. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, "David is in the desert of En-Gedi." So Saul took 3,000 able young men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of the wild goats. The crag of the wild goats is now a nature preserve. And this area supports a small population of Nubian ibex today. Nubian ibex. They are great mountain climbers, these animals. There's steep hillsides there. And because they're such great mountain climbers, it helps them elude any predators. And they're able to get to food and water and shelter that none of the other animals are able to get to. And so David is hiding out here. But David only had 600 soldiers with him. And these soldiers were distressed, they were indebted, and they were bitter, bitter men. They were ready to give up. They were tired. They were being hunted. And Saul chose 3,000 soldiers in the kingdom, his best soldiers, his choice soldiers from all over Israel, to hunt them down. Perhaps a little bit of overkill, but Saul was determined to kill David. He wanted to take out the threat. Now, the caves of En-Gedi, they were a great place to hide if you're an ibex, but not necessarily for a small army, and not when soldiers are tracking you and you don't have good climbing footwear. In verse 3, Saul and his soldiers, they came to the sheep pens along the way. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave. Well, now, fortunes have turned. If any of the soldiers went into the cave, they probably would have found David and his men. They would have called on more soldiers, and David and his men would have been defeated. But Saul needs to go in alone because Saul needs some private time. It's important to the story. That's why the biblical writer writes it. The soldiers had to wait outside because the king needed to go in, and our text says what? Relieve himself. I think some evangelicals were translating this into English, and they were embarrassed to write the word. The Hebrew literally says that Saul went in to, quote unquote, cover his feet. Cover his feet. That's the literal translation. What does that mean? It's a Hebrew idiom. Perhaps the Hebrew writer was embarrassed to write the word in Hebrew too. This is the Bible we're talking about. You don't want to dirty it up or anything. I once did a series called Emoji, and I tried to translate the text with as much emojis as I could. It was really tough, but I worked on it a lot. This is what we put on the screen when we translated this text. Saul went into poop emoji, yeah. Now, here's the thing. It's important that the biblical writer tells you this. It's important. By the way, I can imagine my pastor as a kid reading this text and then saying, "This is the word of the Lord," and then I'd snicker and say, "Thanks be to God." But again, the author's making a serious point. Saul would be alone and as vulnerable as possible. You never got a shot at the king. This is the most vulnerable this evil king would ever be. It's kind of like in The Karate Kid. Daniel waits till Johnny is sitting on the pot, right? And then he gets the water hose and he sprays him down because Johnny's vulnerable and he's not going to be able to catch him, he hopes. The story continues, verse 4. David's men said, "This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, 'I will give your enemy into your hands, David, for you to deal with as you wish.' Then David crept up unnoticed, and he cut off a corner of Saul's robe. But afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of the king's robe." David's soldiers are ready to take Saul out. This would be their only opportunity to get him. He's unguarded. He deserved it. He's hunting them in cold blood. And even if they didn't kill him, why not kidnap him? And then maybe they can escape the cave. Maybe they could finish this little war before it gets any worse for them. They could use him as ransom. This was their opportunity. Take him hostage. But David will have nothing to do with that. In fact, his conscience is eating him up just for cutting a little piece off the king's robe. David feels guilty for dishonoring the king in this way. And he tells the soldiers, no one touches the king. No one touches the king. This man is flawed, but we will honor the position that God gave him, the position that he holds. And he waits for him to finish, and as Saul's going out, friends, that is a picture of real self-control, where you can do the thing that's all about yourself and that's gonna help yourself, but you stand for something higher and you say no. David then calls out to the king, and he shows him a piece of the robe. I had you in my sights, but I'm not gonna harm you, Saul, and I never will. Why are you so threatened by us? We're not after you, and it's wrong for you to be after us. See, David is calling for a truce from a war that should have never started. And then verse 16 continues in our text, and I just want to say, Saul messes up later on, but at least at this point in the story, his heart's moved. He says, is that your voice, David, my son? Oh, he remembers. That's actually his son-in-law. He remembers that. You are more righteous than I. You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. And he goes on and on and on, his apology. And this is kind of my most important point. Self-control is good for you, but it's really important for others that you show it for them. It's good for you to practice self-control. It'll be better for your life, but it's really important that you do this for others. David's loyalty and David's self-control struck right to Saul's heart. That has heart-changing power. He made the king weep out loud. He confesses his sin. He is heartbroken by what his anger has caused to happen and how it has divided his family. It's divided his kingdom, really. Friends, there is power in the fruit of the Spirit. They can help you become a better neighbor. They can help you be a better citizen. And man, they can help you be a better Christian. And to be honest with you, that's exactly what the world needs now. That's what the list is all about. It's about you being a better neighbor, a better citizen, and to be better Christ followers in this world. So use them in your words with others. Use them in your posts online. And ask this question, what does love require of me? Or what does kindness look like right now in this moment? Or how can I show gentleness with this person for them? And how could self-control help me respond in the best way possible?